Hello, I'm Jason Turvey of the Class Consciousness Project, and welcome to the latest in our series of bulletins updating you on class struggle in Britain and across the world. And we start this week at St Mungo's, the homeless charity, where Unite members will start an indefinite strike from the 27th of June in their dispute over pay. The dispute has been exacerbated by an apparent indifference shown by the charity's trustees and management in negotiating with the workers' representatives. St Mungo's have services or accommodation for homeless people in locations including London, Brighton, Bristol, Leicester and Bournemouth, and the workers claim that their take-home pay is less than £20,000 a year. They've also claimed that St Mungo's is run more like a business than a charity and has shown scant regard for the workers and their legitimate claim. Unite has said that the charity has around £16 million in reserve, yet has failed to offer its workers more than a pathetic 2.25% pay rise, with the retail prices index currently standing at 8.7%. Workers have been staging protests outside St Mungo's locations around the country and are calling on the trustees to step up and demand action from the board of the charity to engage in pay talks in good faith and settle the dispute. Meanwhile, teachers who belong to the National Education Union will be taking part in fresh strike action on the 5th and 7th of July in their long-running dispute over pay. The union repeated its call for the Education Secretary Gillian Keegan to negotiate with the unions to settle the dispute. The NEU says that Miss Keegan refused to re-enter pay talks until the School Teachers Review Body published their recommendation on teachers' pay, but now are concerned that the government was considering either ignoring the recommendation, reckoned to be a below-inflation pay rise of 6.5%, or delivering the pay rise but not properly funding it, driving head teachers to make cuts in other areas of their budgets. Three other unions, including the NASUWT, are currently balloting their members for strike action, leading to speculation that autumn term could be seriously affected by coordinated strike action organised by multiple teaching unions. Meanwhile, in transport, the train drivers union, ASLEF, announced this week that their members will be banning overtime for 1 week in July as part of their long-running dispute over pay. The drivers, who work in 16 train operating companies the length and breadth of the country, will refuse to work their rest days from the 3rd to the 8th of July. Now, this overtime ban will cause serious disruption to services operated by those 16 companies, chiefly because modern railways resource their train services, assuming that drivers will work overtime. Essentially, they don't employ enough train drivers to drive all their train services and don't have the capacity to recruit and train new train drivers to fill the gaps in their working rosters. Now, as I said last week, the train operating companies have offered only a paltry 4% for the pay year 2022 to 2023 and then another paltry 4% for the year 2023 to 2024. The government has urged ASLEF to put the offer, such as it is, to their members. However, the members have already made their feelings very clear on the offer by voting overwhelmingly to renew their strike mandate. ASLEF also announced that it planned to take separate action on Avanti West Coast and LNER, also known as the West and the East Coast main lines, on the 2nd of July, with a continuous overtime ban on LNER starting next month. However, after talks with the management, ASLEF subsequently announced that it would suspend their strike action on Avanti West Coast on the 2nd of July, but that the strike action on the East Coast main line is still on. Staying in the railways, and RMT have announced that their members across 14 train operating companies will be taking further strike action next month in their long-standing dispute over pay. RMT members will walk out on the 20th, 22nd and the 29th of July and have said that they have not been invited to any pay talks. The most likely reason for this is because the train operating companies are wholly run by the government, and the government appear to be unwilling to enter further talks whilst their current, albeit paltry, pay offer remains on the table. Now, this is an employer I didn't think I'd be talking about on this bulletin, but Church of England clergy have, for the first time in the church's history, submitted a claim for a pay rise. The union Unite represents some 2,000 clergy and lay officers in the Church of England, has made a claim for an increase in the stipend that they receive of 9.5% to be paid from April next year. Currently, the clergy receive a stipend of just over £29,000 and are calling for an increase to just over £31,000 a year. Unite said that the clergy are struggling alongside everyone else in our cost of living crisis, and whilst people don't enter the service of the church for the money, they still have to pay bills and eat just like the rest of us. And according to Unite, the Church of England is sitting on a total fund of about £10.3 billion, so frankly can afford a fairly modest increase in the stipend that the clergy receive. Turning now to the United States, and unionised workers at the United Parcel Service voted overwhelmingly to authorise strike action in the union's claim for a pay rise and improvements to safety standards. The workers, who are members of the Teamsters Union, voted by 97% to support the authorisation for strike action, but this is intended to give the workers leverage as their union negotiates a settlement. The Teamsters represent some 340,000 UPS workers, more than half of the company's entire United States workforce. Workers are still angry about a two-tier pay scale forced on them in 2018, which was accepted by the Teamsters Union despite the majority of workers voting against it. In order for the contract to be rejected completely, 2/3 of the union's membership needed to vote against it. However, 54% of returned votes were against the terms of the contract, not sufficient to reject it, and so the union accepted the new terms, much to the anger and resentment of union members. Staying in the US, and the wretched and contemptible organisation known as the AFL-CIO voted this week to endorse the anti-worker incumbent President Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. In December last year, Biden signed into law a US Senate bill to crush the US rail workers' dispute. The rail workers were fighting against years of staffing cuts and calling for the introduction of sick leave. Yet the US Senate and the President responded by giving themselves sweeping powers to crush the strikes without recourse. Despite this appalling anti-worker action, Biden was endorsed by the US equivalent of the TUC, well, much like the TUC, but somehow even worse, even though there are almost 18 months before the presidential election is due to take place. The president of the AFL-CIO, Liz Schuler, proclaimed Biden as being the most pro-union president in our lifetime, which of course should make us all think that if this is a pro-union president, what on earth would an anti-union one look like? And that wraps up our bulletin for this week. But if you're involved in a dispute you think we should get to know about, please get in touch with us at classconsciousnessproject@gmail.com, and you can check out our website at classconsciousnessproject.blog, where this week we've released our latest podcast on the thorny issue of football and the state of the modern game, and published what has become a very popular article on the People's Democratic Republic of Korea. You can also find us on Telegram, on Twitter, on Instagram and on Facebook. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Solidarity.